Hello everyone. Welcome back to Buried Files. Tonight we bring you 7 deeply disturbing true cruise ship horror stories that will shatter any illusions of safety on the open ocean. These are not works of fiction, but genuine experiences shared by crew members and passengers who witnessed events that defy logical explanation while trapped miles from shore. Each account comes directly from individuals who lived through encounters with the unexplained, the dangerous, and the impossible aboard vessels where escape is not an option. The ocean holds mysteries that humanity has barely begun to comprehend. And cruise ships sail through waters where the boundaries between our world and something darker grow thin. If you crave authentic horror content rooted in real testimonies that will haunt your thoughts long after you finish listening, subscribe to Buried Files and activate the notification bell so you never miss our investigations into the terrifying truths that others refuse to acknowledge. After these chilling accounts, we encourage you to share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments section below. Whether you have sailed these waters yourself or simply want to discuss what we have uncovered, now prepare yourself as we journey into the darkness that lurks beneath the waves and within the steel corridors of ships where help is hours or days away. It was March of 2023. Camilla was working as a bartender on the Mediterranean Star, one of those massive cruise ships that feels more like a floating city than a boat. The kind of place where you could walk for 20 minutes and still not see the same corridor twice. Where thousands of passengers move through the decks like schools of fish, anonymous and temporary. Camilla had been working the late shift at the Starlight Lounge on Deck 8 for 3 months by that point, and she thought she had seen everything that cruise ship nightlife had to offer. The usual rhythm of serving drinks to tourists, the sound of slot machines in the casino next door, the endless ocean beyond the windows that stretched into darkness every single night. That changed the night she met the woman in the red dress. It was around 11:30 in the evening, and the lounge was starting to empty out. Most passengers had either moved on to the casino or retired to their cabins. Camilla was wiping down the bar, counting the minutes until her shift ended at midnight, when she noticed her. The woman sat alone at a corner table near the floor-to-ceiling windows, wearing a vintage red evening dress that looked like something out of the 1950s. Her hair was styled in perfect victory rolls, and she wore a string of pearls around her neck that caught the dim lounge lighting. Everything about her seemed carefully curated, deliberately old-fashioned, as if she had stepped out of a black and white photograph and into the modern world. Camilla watched as the woman stared out the window at the dark Mediterranean waters, her hands folded on the table in front of her. She did not look at her phone. She did not speak to anyone. She just sat there, motionless, with an expression on her face that Camilla could not quite read. It was not sadness exactly, but something deeper, something that made Camilla feel uncomfortable even from across the room. After a few minutes, Camilla approached the table, her server instincts overriding her unease. She asked if the woman would like to order anything. The woman turned slowly, and when her eyes met Camilla's, there was a moment of recognition that felt impossible. The woman smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they recognize something they have lost. She ordered a martini, very specific, with 3 olives and a twist of lemon. Camilla prepared the drink and brought it back to the table, setting it down carefully on the polished wood surface. The woman thanked her in a soft voice that seemed to come from very far away. And then she said something that made Camilla's skin prickle with goosebumps. She said, "You look just like her. Just like my daughter." Camilla did not know how to respond to that. She offered a polite smile the kind service workers perfect over years of dealing with strange passenger comments, and started to walk away. But the woman reached out and touched Camilla's wrist, her fingers cold despite the warm lounge air. She said, "Please, just for a moment. Let me look at you." Camilla stood there, frozen, while the woman studied her face with an intensity that felt invasive, as if she were trying to memorize every detail. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, the woman released her grip and sat back in her chair. She picked up the martini glass, but did not drink from it, just held it between her hands, like she was trying to absorb its coldness. Camilla excused herself and returned to the bar, her heart beating faster than it should have been. She told herself it was just a lonely passenger, maybe someone who had lost a child and was seeing resemblances that were not really there. Cruise ships attracted all kinds of people, including those running from grief. But when Camilla glanced back at the corner table a few minutes later, the woman was still staring at her, the untouched martini still cradled in her hands. The next night, the woman appeared again. Same corner table, same red dress, same pearls, same untouched martini that Camilla brought her without being asked. This time, the woman did not just stare. She spoke more, her voice gaining strength as the minutes passed. She told Camilla about her daughter, a young woman named Sarah who had been 23 years old when she disappeared. She described Sarah in vivid detail. Her long dark hair that she wore in a braid down her back, her habit of biting her lower lip when she was concentrating, the small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood accident. And as the woman spoke, Camilla felt a creeping sense of recognition, because she had long dark hair that she wore in a braid. She did bite her lower lip when she was thinking, and she did have a small scar above her left eyebrow from falling off a bicycle when she was 7 years old. The woman reached into a small beaded purse that hung from her chair and pulled out a photograph. It was old, the colors faded and the edges worn from being handled too many times. She slid it across the table toward Camilla, and when Camilla looked down at it, her breath caught in her throat. The young woman in the photograph could have been her twin. Same face shape, same eyes, same smile. The only differences were the clothing and the hairstyle, which dated the photo to somewhere around the mid-1980s. Camilla asked where the photo was taken, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman's face crumpled slightly, and she said, "On a cruise ship, the week before she disappeared." That was when Camilla learned that Sarah had vanished from a Mediterranean cruise in the summer of 1987. She had been traveling with her mother, the woman in the red dress, to celebrate her college graduation. On the fourth night of the cruise, Sarah had gone to the upper deck to watch the sunset and never returned. The crew searched every inch of the ship. The Coast Guard was called. Divers searched the waters where the ship had been sailing. But Sarah was simply gone, as if she had stepped through a door into another dimension and closed it behind herself. The woman had been searching for answers ever since, taking cruise after cruise on the same route, hoping to find some trace of her daughter, some explanation for the impossible disappearance. Camilla did not know what to say. She mumbled some inadequate words of sympathy and returned to her duties behind the bar, but her hands were shaking as she poured drinks for the other passengers. The woman stayed until the lounge closed at 2 a.m, sitting in her corner with the untouched martini, staring out at the dark water. When Camilla left for the night, the woman was still there, and a security guard had to gently escort her back to her cabin. The third night, the woman appeared again. By this point, Camilla had started to dread her shifts, checking the corner table every few minutes with a mixture of fear and fascination. The woman seemed to have more energy this time, more urgency. She told Camilla about the investigation into Sarah's disappearance, about the theories that ranged from suicide to murder to human trafficking. She spoke about the other families she had met over the years, people whose loved ones had also vanished from cruise ships under mysterious circumstances. Cases that barely made the news and were quickly forgotten by everyone except those left behind. And then, as the night wore on and the lounge emptied out, the woman leaned forward and said something that Camilla would never forget. She said, "She never made it home. But sometimes, I think she is still here, still on the water, still waiting." Camilla asked what she meant by that, but the woman just shook her head and stood up, smoothing down her red dress with hands that trembled slightly. She picked up her beaded purse and started to walk toward the exit. Camilla called after her, wanting to ask more questions, wanting to understand what was happening. The woman paused in the doorway and turned back, and in the dim lighting of the lounge, her face seemed to flicker, like an old film projector skipping frames. She smiled that same sad, knowing smile and said, "Take care of yourself, Camilla. The ocean does not give back what it takes." And then she was gone. Camilla stood there for a moment, her heart pounding, and then she made a decision. She needed to know more. She needed to understand who this woman was and whether her story was real. After her shift ended, she went down to the security office on deck 3 and asked if they could help her identify a passenger. She described the woman in detail. The red dress, the vintage styling, the pearl necklace, the corner table in the Starlight Lounge. The security officer on duty pulled up the passenger manifest and asked for a cabin number or a last name. Camilla realized she had neither. The woman had never actually ordered a drink using a room charge or a credit card. The martinis had simply appeared on Camilla's order pad, part of her nightly routine, and she had never questioned it. The security officer frowned and asked Camilla to describe the woman again. He pulled up surveillance footage from the Starlight Lounge, scrolling through the recordings from the past 3 nights. Camilla watched the screen, waiting to see the woman in red appear in the corner near the windows. But as the footage played, her blood ran cold. She saw herself moving through the lounge, serving drinks to various passengers, wiping down the bar. She saw herself walk to the corner table multiple times, saw herself set down martini glasses and stand there as if listening to someone speak. But the chair across from her was empty. The corner table showed no other person. On the surveillance footage, Camilla appeared to be talking to thin air, serving drinks to a customer who did not exist. The security officer looked at Camilla with concern and asked if she was feeling all right, if perhaps she needed to see the ship's medical staff. Camilla insisted that she was fine, that there must be some mistake with the cameras, some technical glitch that failed to record the woman. But even as she said it, she knew how it sounded. The security officer suggested that Camilla take a few days off, get some rest, maybe speak to someone about the stress of working late-night shifts. Camilla left the office feeling numb, her mind racing with possibilities that all seemed impossible. She could not sleep that night. She lay in her small crew cabin on deck 2, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the woman, about Sarah, about the photograph that showed a face identical to her own. The next morning, she went to the ship's library, a small quiet space on deck 5 that most passengers ignored in favor of the pools and casinos. She used one of the public computers to search for information about cruise ship disappearances in 1987. It took some time, but eventually she found it. A brief news article from a Mediterranean newspaper dated August 1987. It reported that a young American woman named Sarah Collins had gone missing from the cruise ship Mediterranean Star during a voyage from Barcelona to Rome. Her mother, Margaret Collins, had been traveling with her. The search had been called off after 3 days. No trace of Sarah was ever found. Camilla felt the room spin around her. The Mediterranean Star, the same ship she was working on right now. She searched for more information about Margaret Collins and found an obituary from 2003. Margaret had died of cancer at the age of 68 in a hospice in Boston. The obituary mentioned that she was predeceased by her daughter Sarah, who had died in 1987. There was a photograph accompanying the obituary, a small black and white image of an older woman wearing a simple dress and a string of pearls. It was the same woman who had been sitting in the Starlight Lounge 3 nights in a row. Camilla printed the article and the obituary, her hands shaking so badly that she almost dropped the papers. She brought them to the security office and showed them to the same officer from the night before. He read through them carefully, his expression growing more serious. He asked if Camilla was certain it was the same woman, and Camilla said yes, she was absolutely certain. The officer made some calls. Within a few hours, senior crew members were involved, reviewing the surveillance footage again, checking records, trying to make sense of what had happened. Nobody could explain it. The footage clearly showed Camilla interacting with an empty chair. No passenger matching Margaret Collins' description was registered on the current voyage. The ship's records confirmed that a passenger named Sarah Collins had indeed disappeared in 1987, and that her mother Margaret had been on board. But Margaret had been dead for 20 years. There was no logical explanation for what Camilla had experienced. No rational way to account for the conversations, the photograph, the specific details that Camilla could not possibly have known. The story spread through the crew within days, the way stories always do in the closed environment of a ship. Some people thought Camilla had imagined the whole thing, a stress-induced hallucination brought on by long hours and isolation. Others believed her completely, sharing their own strange experiences from years of working at sea. Tales of passengers who appeared and disappeared, of voices heard in empty corridors, of presences felt in the dead of night when the ship was far from any shore. Camilla did not know what to believe anymore. All she knew was that she had spoken to Margaret Collins, had seen the photograph of Sarah, had felt the cold touch of fingers on her wrist. She requested a transfer to a different ship, but the process would take weeks. In the meantime, she continued working her shifts in the Starlight Lounge, always watching the corner table near the windows, always waiting for the woman in red to appear again. But Margaret never returned. The corner table remained empty, occupied occasionally by other passengers who had no idea of its history, who sat there laughing and drinking and looking out at the dark Mediterranean waters without a second thought. Camilla still works on cruise ships, though she eventually did transfer to a different vessel. She is 26 years old now, and she has not seen Margaret Collins since those 3 nights in March of 2023. But sometimes, when she is closing down the bar late at night and the lounge is empty except for the sound of the ocean beyond the windows, she catches a glimpse of red fabric in her peripheral vision. Sometimes she sees the reflection in the mirror behind the bottles, a woman in vintage clothing sitting alone at a table that should be empty. And sometimes, in the moments before she turns around, she hears a voice that seems to come from very far away, saying the same words over and over. Take care of yourself. The ocean does not give back what it takes. When Camilla turns to look, there is nothing there but empty chairs and dark water and the endless rolling motion of a ship that will never stop moving, will never reach a final destination. will never release the ghosts that walk its corridors, searching for something they will never find. Camilla does not talk about it anymore. She has learned that some experiences cannot be shared, cannot be explained, cannot be understood by people who have not stood in that space between the living world and whatever exists beyond it. She keeps the photograph and the obituary in a folder in her cabin, evidence of something that may or may not have happened. Proof of a woman who died 20 years ago, but still takes cruises on the Mediterranean Star, still searches for her daughter, still sits in corner tables wearing a red dress and pearls and a smile that holds more sorrow than any living person should have to carry. And Camilla wonders, late at night when sleep will not come and the ship rocks gently beneath her, what Sarah Collins found when she stepped through that invisible door in 1987. She wonders if Sarah is still out there somewhere, walking the decks of a ship that exists in a different time, a different dimension, still trying to find her way back to her mother. She wonders if she herself was meant to see Margaret, if there was some purpose to those 3 nights, some message she was supposed to receive or understand. But most of all, she wonders about the resemblance, about the photograph that showed her own face looking back at her from 36 years in the past, about the scar above her eyebrow and the way she bites her lip and the long dark hair she wears in a braid. She wonders if Sarah Collins is truly gone, or if somehow, in ways that defy every law of nature and time, Sarah found a way back after all. Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel R. This story happened during my honeymoon cruise through the Caribbean in September of 2022. I want to start by saying that I have never been someone who believes in ghosts or paranormal activity. I studied engineering in college. I work with concrete facts and measurable data. Everything in my life has always had a logical explanation, a rational cause and effect. But what happened on that cruise ship challenged everything I thought I understood about reality. And 2 years later, I still cannot explain it in any way that makes sense. Elena and I met during our junior year at the University of Florida. She was studying art history, and I was in the engineering program. We sat next to each other in a philosophy elective that neither of us particularly wanted to take. And we bonded over our shared frustration with the reading assignments. We dated for 3 years after graduation, living in a small apartment in Tampa while I worked for a construction firm and she worked at a local museum. When I proposed to her on the beach at sunset, she said yes before I even finished asking the question. We spent the next 2 years saving money for the wedding and for a proper honeymoon, putting away a little bit from each paycheck until we finally had enough to book a 7-day Caribbean cruise on a ship called the Royal Majesty. The Royal Majesty was enormous, one of those modern cruise ships that looks more like a floating hotel than a traditional vessel. It had 15 decks, multiple restaurants, 3 pools, a casino, a theater, and enough entertainment options to keep 3,500 passengers occupied for weeks. Our cabin was on Deck 9, number 9428, what the cruise line called an interior stateroom. It did not have a window or balcony, but it was clean and comfortable, with a queen-sized bed, a small bathroom, and enough storage space for our luggage. We did not plan to spend much time in the cabin anyway. The whole point of the cruise was to explore the ship and visit the different ports of call. Elena is petite, about 5 feet 3 inches tall, with auburn hair that falls to her shoulders and brown eyes that seem to change color depending on the light. She has this way of getting excited about small things, like the towel animals the housekeeping staff would leave on our bed each evening or the intricate ice sculptures in the buffet restaurant. I am tall, just over 6 feet, with brown hair and brown eyes, and the kind of build that comes from spending time in the gym, but not obsessively. We were both 28 years old at the time. and we felt like we had our whole lives stretching out ahead of us, full of possibility and adventure. The first 2 nights on the ship were perfect. We ate at the fancy dining room with the white tablecloths and the 5-course meals. We watched the sunset from the deck while drinking tropical cocktails that came with little umbrellas. We danced badly at the yacht nightclub and laughed at ourselves. We stayed up late talking about our future, about buying a house and eventually having children and all the normal things that newly married couples discuss. On the 3rd night, everything changed. We returned to our cabin around 11 in the evening after seeing a magic show in the main theater. Elena went into the bathroom to get ready for bed, while I sat on the edge of the mattress and checked my phone for messages. That was when I first heard it. The sound coming from the wall to our left, the wall that separated our cabin from the one next door. It was crying. Not loud, theatrical sobbing, but quiet, desperate weeping. The kind of crying that sounds like it has been going on for hours, like whoever is making that sound has run out of tears but cannot stop the reflex of grief. I stood up and pressed my ear against the wall, listening carefully. The sound was definitely coming from the neighboring cabin. It sounded like a woman, though it was hard to be certain through the barrier of the wall. Elena came out of the bathroom and asked what I was doing. I told her to listen. She pressed her ear against the wall beside mine, and after a moment, her eyes widened. She heard it too. "Should we call someone?" Elena asked quietly. "What if someone is hurt?" I picked up the phone in our cabin and dialed the front desk. The woman who answered had a cheerful, professional voice. I explained that we were hearing someone crying in the cabin next to ours, and we were concerned. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then the woman said something that made my stomach drop. "Sir, there is no cabin next to yours. You are in 9428. The cabin numbers on deck 9 go from 9428 to 9430. There is no 9429. I told her that did not make sense. We could clearly hear someone through the wall. She insisted, politely but firmly, that there was no cabin 9429 on the ship. I thanked her and hung up the phone, feeling confused and unsettled. Elena and I looked at each other, both of us thinking the same thing. If there was no cabin next door, what were we hearing? We decided to check the hallway. We opened our cabin door and stepped out into the carpeted corridor. The hallway was empty, lit by small wall sconces that cast a warm yellow glow. To our right was cabin 9430. But when we looked to the left, we both saw it clearly. There was a door there, labeled 9429 in brass numbers, that looked older and more tarnished than the modern plastic numbers on our door. The door itself appeared different from the others in the hallway. The paint was a slightly darker shade of white, and the handle was made of brass rather than the standard card reader system that every other cabin used. Elena reached out and tried the handle. It was locked. She knocked softly, but there was no response from inside. The crying had stopped. The entire hallway was silent, except for the low humming of the ship's ventilation system. We stood there for a long moment, staring at that impossible door, before finally retreating back into our cabin and locking the door behind us. Neither of us slept well that night. The second night, the crying started again around midnight. This time it lasted longer, nearly an hour of constant weeping that seemed to echo through the walls. I went out into the hallway and tried the handle of cabin 9429 again. Still locked. When I returned to our cabin, Elena was sitting on the bed with her arms wrapped around herself, looking pale and frightened. We called the front desk again. A different person answered this time, a man with a Caribbean accent. He gave us the same answer. There was no cabin 9429. When I insisted that I was standing in the hallway looking directly at the door, he became quiet for a moment and then suggested that perhaps we had been drinking and were confused about the cabin numbers. I hung up on him. On the third night, Elena woke me up at 2 a.m. by shaking my shoulder frantically. When I opened my eyes, she was pointing at the wall opposite our bed. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice shaking. "There is someone at the window." I sat up quickly, my heart pounding. We had an interior cabin. There was no window. The wall opposite the bed was solid, covered in a decorative wallpaper with a geometric pattern. But as I stared at it in the darkness, I saw what Elena was seeing. There was a face pressed against the wall, as if the wall were glass and someone was looking in at us from the other side. The features were indistinct, blurred and pale, but I could make out a woman's face with dark hair and wide, desperate eyes. She seemed to be mouthing words, though no sound came through. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. Elena started crying. I turned on all the lights in the cabin and checked every corner, every closet, the bathroom, everywhere. There was nothing and no one. The wall was solid and normal. But when I placed my hand against it, the surface was ice cold, far colder than the air-conditioned temperature of the room should have made it. On the fourth night, we discovered the water. We had been out late trying to stay away from the cabin as long as possible, dancing at the nightclub until nearly 3 a.m. When we returned and opened the cabin door, we both stopped in the doorway, staring. There were wet footprints on the carpet, leading from our bathroom door across the floor to the wall that separated us from cabin 9429. The footprints were small, like they had been made by bare feet, and they gleamed in the overhead light, still wet and fresh. The entire cabin smelled like seawater, that distinctive salt and decay odor of the ocean. I checked the bathroom. The floor was completely dry. The shower had not been used. There was no logical source for the water. Elena refused to enter the cabin. She stood in the hallway while I examined everything, trying to find a rational explanation. There was none. Eventually, we went to the guest services desk in person at 3 a.m. and demanded to speak to a manager. The woman at the desk was sympathetic but unhelpful. She pulled up our cabin information on her computer and, once again, insisted that there was no cabin 9429 anywhere on the ship. When I raised my voice and insisted that we had seen the door, had touched it, she offered to have security escort us back to our cabin to prove it. 2 security officers accompanied us back to Deck 9. We walked to our cabin door, and I pointed to the left, ready to show them the brass numbers and the old-fashioned handle. But the wall was blank. Smooth white paint stretched from our door to the next cabin, 9430, with no door in between. I stood there speechless while the security officers exchanged glances that clearly indicated they thought we were either drunk or crazy. They suggested we get some rest and left us standing in the empty hallway. Back inside our cabin, Elena and I sat on the bed in silence. I knew what I had seen. I knew that door had been there. But I also knew that it was gone now, and I had no way to prove that it had ever existed. We considered leaving the ship at the next port, cutting our honeymoon short and flying home. But something stubborn in me refused to be driven away by something I did not understand. The next morning, I went looking for answers. I spent hours wandering the crew areas of the ship, trying to find someone who had worked on the Royal Majesty for a long time. Eventually, I met a man named Luis, a maintenance worker who had been with the ship for nearly 20 years. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. And when I asked him about cabin 9429, his expression changed completely. He looked around to make sure no one was listening, and then he told me to follow him to a quiet corner of the crew mess hall. Luis spoke in a low voice, his English accented but clear. He told me that cabin 9429 had been sealed in 1998 after a passenger murder-suicide. A couple on their honeymoon, he said. The husband had killed his wife and then killed himself. Their bodies were not discovered for 3 days, not until the housekeeping staff noticed that the "Do Not Disturb" sign had been on the door for too long. The ship underwent a major renovation after that incident, and cabin 9429 was officially removed from the system. The door was sealed from the inside, the cabin number erased from all records, and the space was simply absorbed into the structure of the ship. But Luis said that some crew members still saw things. They heard crying late at night. They saw a door appear in the hallway that should not be there. They found wet footprints that smelled like seawater. The official policy was to deny everything, to insist that cabin 9429 did not exist and never had. But the truth, Luis told me, was that something remained in that space, something that could not rest. On the 5th night, Gabriel woke at 3 in the morning to find the door to his cabin standing wide open. He sat up in bed, his heart hammering in his chest, and saw a trail of wet footprints leading from the doorway out into the hall. He got out of bed carefully, trying not to wake Elena, and followed the watermarks. They led down the corridor, past the sealed wall where cabin 9429 should have been, to the elevator bank, and then to the stairs. Gabriel followed them up, deck after deck, until he reached the open deck at the very top of the ship. The woman was standing at the railing, her back to him. She wore a white nightgown that was soaked through with water, clinging to her thin frame. Her dark hair hung wet and tangled down her back. Gabriel could hear himself breathing, could hear the wind and the sound of the ocean far below, but he could not seem to make his feet move. The woman slowly turned around. Her face was bloated and pale, the skin almost translucent. Her eyes were wide and glassy, and her mouth opened in a silent scream that showed dark water inside instead of a throat. She raised one arm and pointed directly at Gabriel, her finger accusing, demanding. Then she turned back to the railing and jumped. Gabriel rushed forward, his rational mind screaming that this was impossible, that he needed to call for help, that there was a person in the water. He reached the railing and looked down, searching the dark waves for any sign of her. There was nothing. No splash. No ripples in the moonlit water. Nothing at all. Security found him there 20 minutes later, still gripping the railing and staring down at the ocean. Elena was with them, hysterical. The ship went into full man-overboard procedure, stopping engines and launching search protocols. The security cameras were reviewed. The footage showed Gabriel walking alone up the stairs and onto the deck, pointing at empty air, rushing to the railing and looking down at nothing. There was no woman in a white nightgown. There had never been anyone else there. Gabriel and Elena were moved to a different cabin on deck 12 immediately. They spent the remaining 2 days of the cruise mostly in the public areas, avoiding their new cabin as much as possible. When they finally disembarked in Miami, Gabriel felt like he could breathe properly for the first time in days. But the story did not end there. Gabriel researched the ship's history when they returned home. He found old newspaper articles from 1998 about the incident Luis had described. The victims were named Thomas and Marie Brennan, married for less than a month. The official investigation had ruled it a murder-suicide, though some family members disputed that conclusion. Gabriel found a photograph of Marie Brennan in one of the archived articles. She had dark hair and pale skin, and the same desperate eyes Gabriel had seen staring at him from the deck railing. 2 years have passed since that honeymoon cruise. Elena refuses to discuss what happened. She has nightmares, sometimes, waking up gasping and saying she can hear someone crying through the walls. Gabriel keeps all the documentation he collected in a folder in his desk drawer. He has found online forums where other passengers report similar experiences on the Royal Majesty, always involving Deck 9, always involving Cabin 9429. The cruise line denies everything, as Louise said they would. But the stories continue. Sometimes Gabriel still wakes up in the middle of the night, convinced he can hear that quiet, desperate sobbing through walls that should not exist. And he wonders what would have happened if he had somehow managed to open that locked door with the brass handle. Would he and Elena have been able to come back? Or would they have become part of whatever exists in that sealed space, trapped forever in a cabin that officially does not exist, crying out for help that would never arrive? Thank you for listening. If you ever cruise on the Royal Majesty, request a different deck. Trust me on that. Riley had been working as a marine radio operator for almost 6 years by the time this incident occurred. The job was not glamorous, but it paid well and allowed Riley to travel the world while working on various cruise ships. Most nights consisted of monitoring emergency frequencies, logging routine communications between vessels, and occasionally coordinating with Coast Guard stations when ships encountered minor difficulties. It was repetitive work, the kind that could make hours blur together into a hypnotic rhythm of static and automated signals. Riley had become so accustomed to the patterns that any deviation immediately triggered alarm bells in Riley's mind. That particular night in August of 2021, Riley was stationed in the communication room of the Pacific Dream, a mid-sized cruise ship carrying just over 2,000 passengers on a 2-week voyage through the South Pacific. The room was small and cramped, located on Deck 4 in a section of the ship that passengers never saw. It was filled with radio equipment, computer monitors displaying various maritime channels, and enough backup systems to ensure that communication could be maintained even in the worst conditions. Riley sat in the ergonomic chair that had molded to Riley's body shape over countless night shifts, sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos and watching the green lines of data scroll across the primary monitor. At exactly 2:30 in the morning, the automated man overboard alert system registered an incoming signal. The sharp electronic beep cut through the quiet of the communication room, and Riley sat up immediately, setting down the coffee and pulling up the signal details on the screen. The system displayed the information in clear white text against a black background. Ship name, Ocean Serenity. Position, approximately 200 nautical miles to the northwest of the Pacific Dream's current location. Alert type, man overboard, automated beacon activation. Timestamp, 02.28 hours. Riley followed standard protocol. The incident was logged in the communication database, and a notification was sent to the Pacific Dream's bridge to inform the captain. Man overboard situations were always serious, though most of them occurred on other vessels and only required the Pacific Dream to maintain awareness in case assistance was needed. Riley sent a brief acknowledgement signal to the Ocean Serenity and then sat back to wait for any follow-up communications. 45 minutes later, at 3:15 in the morning, another alert came through. Same ship, Ocean Serenity. Another man overboard signal, different beacon identification number, indicating a separate incident. Riley frowned at the screen, feeling the first stirrings of concern. 2 man overboard events from the same ship in less than an hour was highly unusual. It suggested either a serious safety problem or, more ominously, something deliberate happening aboard that vessel. Riley immediately attempted to establish direct radio contact with the Ocean Serenity. The standard hailing frequencies produced nothing but static. Riley tried the emergency channel, then the backup frequencies, then every possible channel that a cruise ship should monitor. There was no response. Just the empty hiss of radio waves traveling across the dark ocean with no one on the other end to receive them. At 3:45 in the morning, a third signal arrived. Ocean Serenity. Man overboard. Different beacon. Riley stood up from the chair, pacing the small communication room and feeling genuine alarm now. Something was terribly wrong. Riley contacted the Pacific Dreams Bridge directly, speaking with the officer on watch and explaining the situation. The officer shared Riley's concern and authorized Riley to contact the regional Coast Guard station to report the incidents. The Coast Guard operator who answered Riley's call was professional and calm. Riley provided all the details. 3 separate man overboard signals from the Ocean Serenity over the course of an hour and 15 minutes. No response to radio hailing attempts. Last known position based on the automated beacon coordinates. The Coast Guard operator asked Riley to hold while she verified the information in the Maritime database. When she came back on the line, her voice had changed. She sounded confused. She told Riley that according to the International Ship Registry and the current vessel tracking system, the Ocean Serenity was currently docked in San Diego, California, undergoing scheduled repairs. The ship had been non-operational for the past 6 weeks. It was impossible for man overboard signals to be originating from that vessel because the Ocean Serenity was not at sea. Riley pulled up the signal data again, checking and rechecking the information. The authentication codes embedded in the automated beacon signals matched the Ocean Serenity's registered emergency equipment perfectly. The beacon identification numbers corresponded to life jackets assigned to that specific ship. There was no question that the signals were coming from Ocean Serenity equipment. But if the ship was in port in San Diego, how could beacons be activating in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? The Coast Guard operator asked Riley for the exact coordinates where the signals originated. Riley read them off the screen. There was a pause, and then the operator informed Riley that she was showing no vessels of any kind in that area on the radar tracking system. The coordinates pointed to open ocean, deep water, far from any shipping lanes. The operator said she would dispatch a patrol to investigate, but she sounded skeptical. Riley thanked her and ended the call, feeling a cold sensation spreading through Riley's chest. At 4:20 in the morning, the fourth and final signal came through. Ocean Serenity. Man overboard. By this point, Riley had been staring at the monitors for nearly 2 hours, and fatigue was starting to mix with fear in a disorienting combination. Riley logged the signal automatically, noting the time and beacon identification in the database. Then Riley did something that was not strictly part of the job. Riley began searching through the archived communication logs, going back through weeks and months of recorded data, looking for any previous signals from the Ocean Serenity. What Riley found made the cold sensation turn into ice. There were no signals in the current year. But going back exactly 12 months to August of the previous year, there were entries. 4 man overboard signals from the Ocean Serenity, all occurring on the same date, August 15th, at intervals of approximately 45 minutes. The times matched almost exactly with the signals Riley had just received. And going back another 12 months before that, there they were again. 4 signals. Same ship, same date, same intervals. Riley printed out the archived logs and compared them side by side with tonight's data. The pattern was undeniable. Every August 15th for the past 3 years, the same 4 man overboard signals had been registered, supposedly originating from the Ocean Serenity. Despite the fact that the ship had been in port for repairs for the past 6 weeks, and checking further back, had not been anywhere near those coordinates on the previous occurrences. Riley called the Coast Guard station back and spoke to the same operator. Riley explained about the pattern, about the identical signals occurring on the same date each year. The operator's skepticism faded somewhat as she pulled up her own historical records and confirmed what Riley was reporting. She said that a patrol vessel had been dispatched to the coordinates and should arrive within approximately 3 hours. She promised to contact Riley with any findings. Riley spent the rest of the shift trying to find a rational explanation. Equipment malfunction seemed possible, except that the signals had valid authentication codes. Some kind of hoax or prank seemed unlikely given the consistency over multiple years, and the fact that activating emergency beacons fraudulently was a serious federal crime. Natural phenomena interfering with the radio equipment could not account for the specificity of the ship identification and beacon numbers. When Riley's shift ended at 6 in the morning, there had been no word from the Coast Guard. Riley went to Riley's cabin but could not sleep, lying in the narrow bunk and staring at the ceiling while the ship rocked gently on the swells. At noon, Riley returned to the communication room, even though it was Riley's off hours. The day shift operator looked up in surprise when Riley entered. Riley asked if there had been any updates from the Coast Guard about the Ocean Serenity investigation. The day operator pulled up the messages and shook his head. The Coast Guard patrol had reached the coordinates at approximately 7:30 that morning. They had conducted a thorough search of the area using radar, sonar, and visual observation. They had found nothing. No debris, no life jackets, no signs of any vessel having been in the area recently. The water in that location was over 3,000 feet deep, and the ocean floor mapping showed nothing but empty seabed. The Coast Guard had officially closed the incident as a false alarm caused by unknown technical interference. But Riley was not satisfied with that explanation. Over the next several days, Riley became somewhat obsessed with the mystery. During off hours, Riley researched the Ocean Serenity's history, looking for any incidents that might explain the phantom signals. What Riley discovered made everything worse. During a Caribbean cruise in August 2 years prior, 4 passengers had disappeared from the Ocean Serenity under mysterious circumstances. The incidents had occurred over the course of a single night, with passengers vanishing from different areas of the ship without any witnesses or security camera footage showing what happened to them. The official investigation had ruled the cases as probable suicides or accidents, though the bodies had never been recovered. The ship had been taken out of service shortly after for the repairs and safety upgrades it was still undergoing. Riley found the exact dates in archived news articles. The 4 passengers had disappeared on August 15th, at times corresponding almost exactly to the intervals between the Phantom Man overboard signals. Their names were listed in the articles. Riley cross-referenced those names with the beacon identification numbers from the signals and felt the hair on the back of Riley's neck stand up. The life jacket assignment records showed that 3 of the 4 beacon numbers matched life jackets that had been assigned to those missing passengers. Riley tried to report this finding to the Coast Guard, to the cruise line, to anyone who would listen. But without physical evidence, and with the Ocean Serenity safely in port thousands of miles away, there was nothing anyone could do. The incidents were classified as coincidence, as technical glitches in the emergency beacon system, as the kind of strange anomaly that sometimes occurred in maritime communications. 2 weeks later, Riley received a phone call from a woman who identified herself as a former crew member of the Ocean Serenity. She said she had heard through the Maritime Workers Network that Riley had been asking questions about the missing passengers. She asked if Riley would meet her for coffee at the next port of call. Riley agreed. The woman was in her 40s, with tired eyes and hands that shook slightly when she lifted her coffee cup. She told Riley that she had been working in housekeeping on the Ocean Serenity the night the 4 passengers disappeared. She said the official story was incomplete. She said that crew members had heard screaming that night, that they had seen things they could not explain, that the ship's security footage for those hours had been corrupted or deliberately erased. She said that she and several other crew members had quit immediately after the ship docked, refusing to ever work on that vessel again. When Riley asked what she thought had happened to the passengers, the woman looked out the window at the harbor and was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said that the ocean keeps its secrets, but sometimes it sends messages. Sometimes it reminds us that there are forces we do not understand and deaths that demand to be remembered. Riley still works as a marine radio operator, currently stationed on a different ship traveling different routes. But every August 15th, Riley makes sure to be on duty during the early morning hours. And every year, the signals come through like clockwork. 4-man overboard alerts from the Ocean Serenity, a ship that remains in port, sending automated distress calls from life jackets worn by people who disappeared 2 years ago and were never found. Riley logs them every time, documenting the pattern that no one else seems willing to acknowledge. And Riley thinks about those 4 passengers and wonders if the emergency beacon's activated when they hit the water, or if something else is triggering those signals, something that wants the world to know that the ocean never truly lets go of the people it takes. This happened when Caleb was 23 years old, working his first contract as a deckhand on a major cruise ship. He had graduated from college the previous spring with a degree in marine biology, but the research positions he had hoped for were scarce and competitive. Working on a cruise ship seemed like a reasonable compromise, a way to spend time at sea while earning money and figuring out his next move. Looking back now, he realizes he should have paid more attention to the warnings. He should have listened to the other crew members who spoke in hushed voices about the dangers that came not from the ocean itself, but from the people you worked alongside. He is sharing this story because people need to know that not every accident is really an accident. The ship was called the Freedom of the Seas, a massive vessel that carried over 4,000 passengers and employed a crew of nearly 1,500 people from dozens of different countries. Caleb had signed a 6-month contract and reported for duty in Miami in June of 2019. His job as a deckhand involved maintenance work, safety equipment inspections, and assisting with the various procedures that kept a cruise ship running smoothly. It was physically demanding work, often performed in extreme heat or during rough weather. But Caleb enjoyed it. He liked being outside, liked the satisfaction of fixing things with his own hands, liked the camaraderie that developed among the deck crew. Caleb was from a small town in Ohio, landlocked and unremarkable, and the ocean had always fascinated him. He was tall and lean, with sun-bleached brown hair and the kind of permanent tan that comes from working outdoors in tropical climates. Within his first week aboard, he had befriended 2 other deckhands who became his closest companions. Marcus was from Jamaica, a few years older than Caleb, with an infectious laugh and an encyclopedic knowledge of reggae music. Sophia was from the Philippines, quiet and serious, studying engineering through online courses during her off hours. The 3 of them worked together, ate together, and spent their limited free time exploring whatever port the ship happened to be docked at. Their supervisor was a man named Henrik, a Danish crew member in his mid-40s who had been working on ships for over 20 years. Henrik was strict but fair, the kind of manager who demanded excellence but also respected the people under his command. He made sure his crew took proper breaks, checked in on them when they seemed stressed or homesick, and advocated for them when dealing with the ship's administration. Caleb respected Henrik and tried to learn everything he could from him, but there was tension on the deck crew, centered around another crew member named Ivan. Ivan was Russian, somewhere in his 30s, with a stocky build and a perpetually angry expression. He had been written up multiple times for showing up late to shifts, for arguing with passengers, for failing to complete assigned tasks. 2 months before Caleb joined the crew, Henrik had filed an official complaint about Ivan's behavior, recommending that his contract not be renewed. Ivan knew about the complaint, and his resentment toward Henrik was obvious to everyone who worked with them. In early August, 3 months into Caleb's contract, the monthly lifeboat drill was scheduled. These drills were mandatory safety procedures required by maritime law to ensure that all crew members knew how to properly deploy and operate the lifeboats in case of a genuine emergency. The drill involved teams of crew members entering the lifeboats while they were still secured to the side of the ship, then being lowered partway down toward the water to test the davit system, the crane-like mechanism that held and controlled the boats. It was routine, something Caleb had participated in twice before without incident. Henrik posted the team assignments the night before the drill. Caleb, Marcus, Sophia, and Ivan were assigned to Lifeboat 7 on the starboard side of Deck 5. When Caleb saw Ivan's name on the list with theirs, he felt a flicker of unease, but he pushed it aside. Professional crew members put aside personal conflicts during safety procedures. That was basic maritime protocol. The drill was scheduled for 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. The ship was at sea, between ports, sailing through calm Caribbean waters under a cloudless sky. Caleb, Marcus, and Sophia arrived at the muster station a few minutes early, as they always did. Ivan showed up exactly on time, already looking irritated about something. He did not make eye contact with any of them, just muttered something in Russian under his breath and stood apart from the group. Henrik arrived with his clipboard and safety equipment, conducted the briefing, and then directed the 4 of them to board Lifeboat 7. The lifeboat was an enclosed capsule designed to protect passengers from the elements during an emergency evacuation. It had small, round windows, bench seating along both sides, and enough capacity for approximately 60 people. Caleb climbed in first, taking a seat near the front. Marcus and Sophia followed, sitting across from each other in the middle section. Ivan entered last and sat near the back, still wearing that strange, angry expression. Henrik secured the hatch from the outside and moved to the control panel mounted on the deck. Through the small window, Caleb could see him checking gauges and switches, following the standard procedure. Henrik gave a thumbs-up signal, and then the davit system engaged with a mechanical whir. The lifeboat shifted slightly as it took the full weight of the 4 crew members inside, and then it began to descend. The lowering process was supposed to be smooth and controlled. A steady descent of about 20 feet until the boat was hovering just above the water's surface, at which point it would be raised back up and the drill would be complete. That is not what happened. They had descended perhaps 10 feet when the lifeboat suddenly jerked violently to one side. Caleb grabbed the edge of his seat to keep from being thrown across the interior. Sophia let out a sharp cry of alarm. The lifeboat tilted at a dangerous angle, maybe 30 degrees off level, and everyone inside slid toward the lower side. Marcus shouted something, but Caleb could not hear him over the sound of the davit cables groaning under the uneven strain. The emergency brake should have engaged automatically, stopping the descent and locking the lifeboat in place while the problem was assessed. But the brake did not engage. Instead, the lifeboat dropped, falling approximately 15 feet in less than 2 seconds before hitting the ocean surface sideways. The impact was tremendous, a bone-jarring crash that knocked Caleb's head against the wall and filled the interior with the sound of stressed metal and rushing water. For a few seconds, everything was chaos. The lifeboat rocked violently in the wake of the ship. Water was coming in through a damaged seal near the hatch, not flooding in quickly but steadily enough to be dangerous. Sophia was unconscious, slumped against Marcus with blood running from a gash on her forehead where she had struck something during the fall. Her arm was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Marcus was shouting into the emergency radio, but no sound was coming out. The equipment was dead. Caleb looked toward the back of the lifeboat where Ivan sat. Ivan had been thrown from his seat during the fall, but appeared uninjured, and he was smiling. It was a strange, satisfied smile that made Caleb's blood run cold. Ivan looked directly at Caleb and said, in perfect English, "Accidents happen all the time on ships. Henrik should have been more careful with the equipment." In that moment, Caleb understood. This was not an accident. This was deliberate. Ivan had done something to the lifeboat, had sabotaged the davit system or the emergency brake or both, intending to cause exactly this kind of catastrophic failure. And he had done it because of his grudge against Henrik, not caring that he might kill or injure the other crew members who were trapped in the boat with him. Caleb did not have time to process the rage he felt. Sophia was injured and possibly dying. They were taking on water. The radio was not working. He kicked out one of the small round windows, breaking the reinforced glass with his boot heel, and began waving his arms and shouting for help. The ship's emergency response team had already seen the lifeboat fall and were launching a rescue boat from a different davit point. Within 10 minutes, all 4 of them had been pulled from the damaged lifeboat and brought back aboard the ship. Sophia was rushed to the medical bay with a severe concussion, a broken arm, and several cracked ribs. She spent 2 days unconscious before finally waking up. And she still has permanent nerve damage in her arm that ended her dreams of becoming an engineer. Marcus and Caleb were bruised and shaken, but physically uninjured. Ivan claimed to have injured his back during the fall, though medical examination found no evidence of any damage. The ship's safety officer immediately began an investigation. When the davit system for Lifeboat 7 was examined, the inspectors found that one of the critical bolts in the release mechanism had been partially unscrewed, just enough that it would fail under the weight and motion of the lowering procedure. The security footage showed Ivan near Lifeboat 7 the night before the drill, alone during a time when he should have been off duty. When confronted, Ivan claimed he had been conducting a routine inspection, something that was technically within his job responsibilities, but highly unusual for him to do voluntarily. A search of Ivan's cabin revealed a journal filled with angry entries about Henrik and the ship's management. Multiple pages described his desire to teach them a lesson about safety and to show them what happens when they try to get rid of good workers. The entries made it clear that Ivan had planned some kind of retaliation, though they did not explicitly admit to sabotaging the lifeboat. Ivan was arrested by ship security and confined to a holding area until the vessel reached the next port, where he was turned over to federal authorities. The legal case dragged on for months, complicated by jurisdictional issues and the fact that the incident occurred in international waters. Eventually, Ivan was convicted of reckless endangerment and criminal negligence. He served 2 years in federal prison. Henrik quit the cruise line 3 months after the incident. Despite being a victim of Ivan's vindictive sabotage, he could not shake the guilt of having been at the control panel when the lifeboat fell. He could not stop thinking that maybe he should have noticed something was wrong, should have caught the tampering before the drill began, should have protected his crew better. Caleb heard through the Maritime Workers Network that Henrik now works at a shipyard in Copenhagen, on dry land, never setting foot on another cruise ship. Caleb finished his contract, but did not renew it. He works now at a marine research facility in California, the kind of position he had wanted all along, though the path to get there was far more traumatic than he ever could have imagined. He still has nightmares about the tilting lifeboat, about the moment of impact with the water, about seeing Sophia's unconscious body and not knowing if she was alive. But what haunts him most is Ivan's face. That satisfied smile, the absolute lack of remorse in his eyes. Because the worst part of working at sea, Caleb now understands, is not the danger of storms or mechanical failures or the vast, indifferent ocean that surrounds you. The worst part is realizing that you trust your crew with your life. You depend on them absolutely. And when that trust is broken, everything becomes dangerous. Not all cruise ship horror stories are about passengers or ghosts or mysterious disappearances. Sometimes the real danger comes from the people you work alongside every day. The ones who wear uniforms and smile and harbor resentments that can turn deadly without warning. Lily thinks about this experience every single day since it happened. 3 years have passed, and she still cannot fully process what she witnessed or thought she witnessed on that June morning in 2022. She has questioned her own sanity more times than she can count, has wondered if stress or exhaustion or some kind of psychological break caused her mind to fabricate the entire experience. But deep down, in the place where certainty lives beyond rational explanation, Lily knows that what happened on the Celestial Voyager was real. Lily was working as a cruise ship photographer at the time, one of those positions that sounds glamorous, but mostly involves standing in the same spot for hours, taking pictures of passengers dressed up for dinner, or following families around the ship trying to convince them to purchase overpriced photo packages. She had been doing the job for about 2 years, working on various ships throughout Alaska and the Caribbean. The Celestial Voyager was a small luxury liner, carrying a maximum of 800 passengers, catering to an older, wealthier demographic who wanted a more intimate cruise experience. The voyage was a 7-day Alaska cruise, departing from Seattle and sailing through the Inside Passage to various ports where passengers could see glaciers and wildlife and quaint coastal towns. It was day 3 of the voyage, and Lily woke up at 7 in the morning, as she always did, preparing to set up her photography station on Deck 5 before the breakfast rush began. She went through her normal routine, showered, dressed in her uniform, grabbed her camera equipment, and stepped out of her cabin. The hallway was empty. That was not particularly unusual. 7 in the morning was early for most cruise passengers, who tended to sleep in on vacation. But as Lily walked through the corridor toward the elevator, she noticed how quiet everything was. Normally, even at this hour, there would be sounds. Housekeeping carts being moved, the distant clatter of breakfast service being prepared, other crew members heading to their stations. But this morning, there was nothing but the low mechanical hum of the ship's engines and ventilation system. Lily reached the elevator bank and pressed the button. While waiting, she glanced around the hallway, feeling the first stirrings of unease. Every cabin door was closed. No "Do Not Disturb" signs hanging from handles. No room service trays left outside for collection. Just rows of identical doors stretching in both directions, silent and still. The elevator arrived and Lily stepped inside, pressing the button for Deck 5. As the elevator ascended, she tried to shake off the strange feeling creeping over her. When the doors opened onto Deck 5, Lily stepped out into the main atrium. This was the heart of the ship. A multi-story open space with glass elevators, a grand staircase, decorative railings on each level, and normally hundreds of people moving through it at any given time. But the atrium was completely empty. Lily stood there, her camera equipment bag hanging from her shoulder, staring at the vacant space. The lights were on. The decorative fountains were running. But there was not a single person anywhere in sight. Lily walked quickly to the main restaurant on Deck 6. The doors were propped open, and inside she could see tables set for breakfast. The buffet stations were filled with food in warming trays. Steam rose from coffee urns. Fresh fruit was arranged in artistic displays. Everything looked ready for service, but there were no passengers eating and no crew members working. Just empty tables and the smell of eggs and bacon and the eerie silence of a space designed for crowds that contained no one at all. Panic started to build in Lily's chest. She pulled out her phone and tried calling her supervisor. The call went straight to voicemail. She tried texting several coworkers. No responses. She ran to the pool deck on deck 7. The pools were filled with water that reflected the morning sky. Loungers were arranged in neat rows, some with towels already laid out. The bar was set up and ready for business. But there was not a single person anywhere on the entire deck. Lily returned inside and started running through the ship, checking passenger areas frantically. The casino was empty, slot machines standing silent and dark. The theater had its lights on and the stage curtains drawn, but every seat was vacant. The shops were unlocked with merchandise displayed on shelves and registers ready to process transactions, but no shopkeepers and no customers. Lily made her way back to the cabin deck and began pounding on doors, shouting for someone to respond. Her voice echoed off the walls, but nobody answered. She sprinted to the crew areas, thinking maybe there had been some kind of emergency drill that she had somehow missed notification of. But the crew mess hall was empty. The laundry room was running, machines tumbling loads of linens, but no workers were present. The administrative offices were vacant, computers on and screensavers cycling through crew's promotional images. And then Lily went to the bridge. The door to the bridge should have been locked. It was always locked. Access was restricted to senior officers only. But when Lily reached the heavy metal door, it was standing open about 6 inches. She hesitated, her hand shaking as she pushed it wider. The bridge was empty. Control panels glowed with displays showing the ship's course, speed, and position. Coffee cups sat on the console, still warm to the touch when Lily pressed her fingers against them. A half-eaten sandwich rested on the captain's chair. Navigation charts were spread across the table. But there was no captain, no officers, no one at all manning the controls of a ship that was currently sailing through Alaskan waters carrying 800 passengers. The ship was operating on autopilot, Lily realized. The systems were running themselves, maintaining course and speed, but there was nobody actually piloting the vessel. She stood in the empty bridge, her mind struggling to process the impossible situation. Where had everyone gone? All 600 passengers and 200 crew members could not have simply disappeared. There had to be a rational explanation. That was when Lily noticed the piece of paper lying on the navigation table. It was a single sheet, handwritten in neat block letters. The message was simple and terrifying. Deck 2, Cargo Hold 3. Lily held the paper with trembling fingers. Every instinct screamed at her to not go down to Deck 2, to not investigate cargo holds, to stay in the relative safety of the passenger areas. But she needed answers. She needed to know what had happened to everyone. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket, left the bridge, and took the stairs down to Deck 2. The cargo deck was restricted area, industrial and cold, lit by harsh fluorescent lights and lined with metal doors that required security clearance to access. But when Lily reached Cargo Hold 3, the door was propped open with a rubber wedge. She could hear something from inside. A low humming sound, electrical or mechanical, she could not tell which. She stepped through the doorway into the dimly lit hold. The cargo hold was cavernous, filled with shipping containers stacked in organized rows. Emergency lighting cast everything in a pale green glow. Lily followed the humming sound deeper into the hold, navigating around containers and equipment. And then she rounded a corner and stopped dead, her breath catching in her throat. They were all there, every passenger and every crew member, more than 800 people, standing motionless in the cargo hold. They faced the same direction, toward the far wall, their backs to Lily. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just stood there, perfectly still, eyes open and staring at something Lily could not see from her angle. Lily wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. She approached the nearest person, a woman in a bathrobe who must have come straight from her cabin. Lily touched her shoulder and shook her gently. The woman did not react. Lily moved around to see her face. The woman's eyes were open and unblinking, fixed on the wall ahead. Lily checked her pulse. She was alive, breathing, but completely unresponsive, locked in some kind of trance state. Lily moved through the crowd, checking other people. They were all the same, standing, breathing, alive, but utterly unreachable. And then Lily made her way to the front of the crowd to see what they were all staring at. The far wall of the cargo hold was covered with something, a pattern or design that Lily could not quite focus on. It seemed to move and shift, even though she knew that was impossible. Geometric shapes overlapped with organic curves. Colors that should not exist together somehow did. The longer Lily looked at it, the harder it became to look away. She felt her mind going foggy. Her feet started moving forward of their own accord, drawn toward the pattern. In the last moment of conscious thought, Lily realized she was about to join them, about to become another motionless figure standing in the dark. With enormous effort, she tore her gaze away from the pattern and ran. Lily fled the cargo hold, not stopping until she was back on the upper decks. She tried to use the radio equipment on the bridge to call for help, but nothing responded. She tried to change the ship's course, but the controls were locked. Hours passed. Lily stayed on the open deck, terrified to go back down, terrified of what she had seen. And then, as the sun began to set, she heard voices. Passengers were everywhere suddenly, talking and laughing and moving through the ship as if nothing had happened. Crew members were at their stations, working normally. Lily ran down to the atrium and grabbed the first crew member she saw, asking frantically where everyone had been. The crew member looked at her with confusion, said they had been working all day, asked if Lily was feeling all right. Lily checked the time. Her watch showed that only 4 hours had passed, but it had felt like 12. She asked passengers about their day. They described normal activities, shore excursions, meals, entertainment. Nobody had any memory gap. When Lily insisted on checking cargo hold 3 with security, they found it locked and normal. No pattern on the wall, no evidence that 800 people had been standing there in a trance. The security officer said the hold had been sealed all voyage. The ship's doctor examined Lily and suggested stress and exhaustion. Lily completed the rest of the cruise in a state of fear, watching other passengers constantly. She quit her job immediately upon docking and has never worked on a cruise ship since. She researched the Celestial Voyager's history but found no similar incidents. She considered psychiatric help but decided against it, knowing what she saw was real. The worst part is not knowing if it happened, or if everyone is pretending it did not, and wondering if it happens on other ships, if passengers right now are standing motionless in cargo holds while cruise ships sail across empty oceans. This happened to Wyatt and 3 of his friends, so he knows he did not imagine it. that fact provides both comfort and terror. Because if it had been just Wyatt alone, he could have convinced himself it was exhaustion or too much alcohol or some trick of moonlight on water. But all four of them saw it. All four of them watched for over 30 minutes. And none of them have been able to explain it in the 4 years since that October night in 2020. The friend group consisted of Wyatt, Eleanor, Andrew, and Natalie. They had all met during their sophomore year at the University of Georgia and remained close even after graduation. By 2020, they were all in their mid-20s, working various jobs and living in different cities. But they still made time to take trips together. The Caribbean cruise had been Andrew's idea. A week-long voyage through the Western Caribbean on a ship called the Caribbean Empress. It was supposed to be relaxing, a chance to disconnect from work stress and pandemic anxiety, and just enjoy being young and relatively carefree for 7 days. The four friends had fallen into a comfortable routine by the third night of the cruise. They were all night owls, naturally inclined to stay up late, and they had discovered that the aft deck on Deck 7 was usually deserted after midnight. The aft deck was at the very back of the ship, with a wide observation area that overlooked the wake spreading out behind the vessel. They would bring drinks from the bars that stayed open late, claim a cluster of deck chairs, and spend hours talking and watching the ocean pass beneath them. The ship's lights illuminated the water directly behind the vessel, making the white foam of the wake visible for at least 100 yards before it dissolved back into the dark sea. The night it happened was perfect for sitting outside. The sky was clear and filled with stars. A full moon hung low over the horizon, bright enough to cast shadows. The sea was calm, almost glassy, with just enough swell to create the gentle rocking motion that reminded passengers they were on a ship. There was no wind. The air was warm and humid, typical for the Caribbean in October. The Caribbean Empress was traveling at a steady speed, around 20 knots, creating the rhythmic sound of water being pushed aside by thousands of tons of steel. Wyatt, Eleanor, Andrew, and Natalie had been sitting on the aft deck for maybe an hour, talking about nothing in particular, when Eleanor suddenly sat up straight in her deck chair and pointed at the water. "What is that?" she asked, her voice uncertain. The others followed her gaze. At first, Wyatt did not see anything unusual, just the white wake spreading out behind the ship, illuminated by the deck lights and the moonlight. But then, he saw movement. Something was in the water, approximately 30 feet behind the ship, centered perfectly in the wake. It was a human figure. Someone was swimming in the water, keeping exact pace with the vessel. "Is that a person?" Natalie asked, standing up and moving to the railing. "It looks like a person," Andrew said slowly. "But that's impossible. The ship is doing at least 20 knots. No one can swim that fast." They all stood at the railing now, staring down at the figure in the water. It was definitely human-shaped. They could see arms moving in a rhythmic freestyle stroke, legs kicking behind, creating small splashes of white water. The swimming form was perfect, professional, like an Olympic athlete in the middle of a race. But the figure was not struggling. There was no desperation in the movement, no indication that the swimmer was trying to catch up to the ship or signal for help. The person was simply swimming, maintaining a steady position 30 feet behind the vessel, matching the ship's speed exactly. "Should we call someone?" Eleanor asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Call them and say what?" Andrew replied. "That someone is swimming behind the ship? They'll think we're drunk or crazy." "I'll get my binoculars," Wyatt said. He had brought a pair on the trip specifically for whale watching during the day. His cabin was just 2 decks below. He ran down the stairs, grabbed the binoculars from his luggage, and ran back up. The whole trip took maybe 2 minutes. When he returned to the aft deck, the others were still at the railing, still staring at the water. The swimmer was still there. Wyatt raised the binoculars and adjusted the focus. Through the magnified lenses, the details became clearer and more disturbing. The swimmer was male, lean, and muscular, with dark hair slicked back by the water. His swimming technique was flawless. His arms pulled through the water with mechanical precision. His breathing was controlled, turning his head at perfect intervals. There was no visible strain on his face, no exhaustion, nothing to indicate he was performing an impossible physical feat. Most disturbing of all, as Wyatt watched through the binoculars, the swimmer looked up. He turned his face toward the ship, making direct eye contact with Wyatt despite the distance and the darkness. And he smiled. It was not a smile of distress or a plea for rescue. It was a knowing smile, almost playful, as if the swimmer were enjoying some private joke. Wyatt felt his stomach drop. "He's looking at us," Wyatt said quietly. "He knows we're watching." "We need to call security," Natalie insisted. "This is a man overboard situation. They need to stop the ship." They debated for maybe 30 seconds, all while continuing to watch the swimmer. Finally, they agreed that regardless of how impossible it seemed, they needed to alert the crew. Andrew pulled out his cabin key card, which had the emergency number printed on the back, and used his cell phone to call the bridge. The conversation was brief and confusing. Andrew tried to explain that there was someone swimming behind the ship, keeping pace with the vessel. The officer, on the other end of the line, sounded skeptical, but said he would dispatch security to the aft deck immediately. Andrew hung up and they waited, all 4 of them still watching the swimmer in the water below. The security officers arrived within 3 minutes. There were 2 of them, both looking tired and annoyed at being called out for what they probably assumed was a prank. Wyatt, Eleanor, Andrew, and Natalie all started talking at once, pointing at the water, insisting there was someone swimming behind the ship. The security officers approached the railing and looked down at the wake. "Where?" one of them asked. "Right there," Wyatt said, pointing. 30 feet back, right in the center of the wake. The security officer pulled out a high-powered flashlight and swept the beam across the water. The light illuminated the white foam, the dark swells beyond, but nothing else. "I don't see anything," he said. "He was just there," Eleanor said desperately. "All 4 of us saw him. He was swimming." The other security officer was already radioing the bridge, confirming that there were no man overboard alerts and no reports of missing passengers or crew. He asked the 4 friends if they had taken any video or photos. None of them had. It had not occurred to any of them to record what they were seeing. They had been too mesmerized, too shocked. The security officers were polite but clearly skeptical. They explained that it was physically impossible for a human being to swim at 20 knots, that the ship would have left anyone in the water miles behind within minutes. They suggested that what the friends had seen was probably a dolphin or a large fish, maybe even a reflection of the moonlight, creating an optical illusion. They logged the incident as a possible marine life sighting and suggested the friends get some rest. After the security officers left, the 4 friends stood at the railing in silence. Wyatt scanned the water with the binoculars, searching for any sign of the swimmer. There was nothing. The wake spread out behind the ship, empty except for foam and moonlight. Whatever they had seen, or whoever they had seen, was gone. "I know what I saw," Eleanor said quietly. "That was a person. a man swimming. "We all saw it," Andrew agreed. "All four of us." They stayed on the aft deck for another hour, waiting to see if the swimmer would reappear. He did not. Eventually, exhaustion and unease drove them back to their cabins. None of them slept well that night. The next morning, they met for breakfast and immediately started researching on their phones. They searched for reports of people swimming behind cruise ships, for explanations of what they might have witnessed. What they found was disturbing. There were dozens of reports, maybe hundreds, scattered across cruise ship forums and travel blogs and Reddit threads. Different ships, different oceans, different years, but the same basic story. Passengers reporting seeing a figure, swimming in the wake, keeping impossible pace with the vessel, sometimes for hours. Always night sightings, always in calm waters, always dismissed by crew. They found a forum post from 2015 where a couple described watching a swimmer follow their Caribbean cruise ship for an entire night. From midnight until sunrise. They found a blog entry from 2018 where a solo traveler in the Mediterranean reported seeing a figure swimming behind the ship, waving at passengers before disappearing. They found a Reddit thread from 2019 with multiple people sharing similar experiences from an Alaska cruise, describing a swimmer in freezing water who showed no signs of hypothermia or distress. None of the reports were taken seriously by cruise lines or maritime authorities. All were classified as misidentifications of marine life or tricks of light on water. But the consistency was undeniable. The details matched across unrelated reports from people who had no connection to each other. And in several accounts, witnesses mentioned the same detail that haunted Wyatt. The swimmer had made eye contact and smiled. The four friends returned to the aft deck every night for the remainder of the cruise. They never saw the swimmer again, but they noticed other passengers standing at the railings late at night, looking down at the water, pointing at something. They overheard conversations in elevators and restaurants where people described seeing something in the wake, something they could not quite explain. Nobody wanted to be the first to say they saw a person swimming behind the ship. Nobody wanted to be thought crazy. After the cruise ended, Wyatt became somewhat obsessed with finding an explanation. He contacted maritime researchers and oceanographers, most of whom politely dismissed his inquiry. But one researcher sent a cryptic response that Wyatt has never forgotten. The researcher wrote, "There are things in deep ocean that we do not understand. Things that have been there far longer than ships have been sailing. Some of them watch us. Some of them follow us. And some of them want to be seen." The researcher also mentioned that similar sightings appeared in ship logs going back over 100 years, always dismissed, never officially investigated. Wyatt started keeping a spreadsheet, collecting every report he could find online. He has documented over 200 separate sightings now, spanning multiple decades and every major ocean on Earth. 4 years later, the group still discusses what they saw that night. Eleanor has nightmares sometimes, dreams of the swimmer climbing up the side of the ship and walking the decks, dripping seawater and smiling. Andrew has analyzed the sighting patterns and believes they correspond to specific shipping routes and lunar cycles, always full moons or near full moons. Natalie refuses to talk about it in depth, gets angry when the subject is raised for too long, as if discussing it might somehow make it real again. Wyatt still takes cruises. He still goes to the aft deck late at night. He is still looking for answers. He wants to see the swimmer again, wants to understand what it was, wants proof that will make someone believe him. But he never stands close to the railing anymore. Because the worst question is not what was swimming behind the ship that night, or why it could keep pace for so long, or why it disappeared the moment security arrived. The worst question is, how many are out there? How many figures swim through the dark ocean behind ships every night, matching impossible speeds, smiling at passengers who are brave enough or foolish enough to watch? And what happens if one of them decides to stop swimming and start climbing? This happened to Joshua 2 weeks ago. The timing is important because everything is still fresh in his mind, every detail sharp and clear, not yet softened by the passage of time into something that might feel less real. Joshua works as a sound engineer on cruise ships, specifically managing the public announcement and PA system that broadcasts messages throughout the vessel. It is technical work, the kind that requires attention to detail and a thorough understanding of audio systems, emergency protocols, and maritime communication standards. He has been doing this job for 4 years, working on various ships, and he thought he had encountered every possible technical issue and system malfunction. He was wrong. The ship is called the Grand Horizon, one of the larger transatlantic cruise liners, carrying approximately 3,000 passengers on regular crossings between New York and Southampton. Joshua's work schedule involves late-night maintenance shifts, usually from 11 in the evening until 3 in the morning, when most passengers are asleep, and he can run diagnostics and system checks without disrupting announcements or interfering with daytime operations. The technical room where he works is located on Deck 3, below the passenger areas, a small windowless space filled with audio equipment, computer monitors, mixing boards, and enough backup systems to ensure that communication can be maintained even during emergencies. On this particular crossing, the ship had departed New York 3 days earlier and was approximately halfway to Southampton, sailing through deep Atlantic waters far from any coastline. Joshua was alone in the technical room, which was normal for his shift. The work was repetitive but important, checking audio levels on all speaker zones throughout the ship, testing emergency broadcast capabilities, reviewing recorded announcements for clarity, updating system logs. He had his thermos of coffee, his checklist of tasks, and the quiet hum of equipment for company. At exactly 1:47 in the morning, all of his monitors simultaneously displayed an incoming announcement. Joshua sat up immediately, setting down his coffee and focusing on the screens. Incoming announcements were unusual at this hour. The bridge occasionally made weather updates or navigational information broadcasts, but those were always scheduled and logged in advance. This announcement had no scheduled entry. The source field on his screen displayed a single word, unknown. Joshua hesitated, his finger hovering over the button that would allow the announcement to broadcast ship-wide. Standard protocol required him to preview any unscheduled announcement before allowing it to play for passengers. He clicked the preview function, and a female voice filled the technical room through his monitoring speakers. The voice was calm and professional, exactly the kind of tone used for routine cruise ship announcements. It said, "Good evening, passengers and crew. This is your captain speaking." Joshua frowned. The captain was a woman named Patricia Hendricks, and while the voice sounded similar, something was slightly off about the cadence and pronunciation. The announcement continued. "We wanted to inform you that we have reached our final destination. Please proceed calmly to your assigned muster stations. Do not bring belongings. Do not return to your cabins. Time remaining, 47 minutes. The announcement ended. Joshua sat in his chair, staring at the monitors, his mind racing. Final destination? They were still 2 full days from Southampton. Muster stations were for emergency evacuations. And what did time remaining mean? 47 minutes until what? Joshua immediately attempted to trace the source of the announcement through the system. He pulled up the transmission logs, checked the authentication codes, reviewed every possible input channel. The system showed no record of the announcement having been received. According to the logs, The last broadcast had been a routine evening entertainment update at 9 o'clock, over 4 hours earlier. But Joshua had heard the announcement clearly. It had displayed on all his monitors. It existed. He called the bridge using the direct line. The officer on watch answered, sounding sleepy. Joshua asked if Captain Hendricks had just made an announcement or authorized any broadcasts. The officer said no. The captain had retired to her cabin over an hour ago and had left no instructions for any announcements. Joshua explained what he had heard. The officer suggested it might be a system malfunction, perhaps a stored message playing at the wrong time. He promised to check with the captain in the morning. Joshua ended the call and sat back in his chair, feeling uneasy. He pulled up the camera feeds that monitored passenger areas throughout the ship. Every screen showed sleeping corridors, empty public spaces, the normal appearance of a cruise ship at 2 in the morning. Nobody was moving toward muster stations. Nobody had reacted to the announcement, which meant it had not broadcast ship-wide. It had played only in his technical room, only for him to hear. But why would a phantom announcement play only for the sound engineer? Joshua rewound the system logs and played back the audio recording from his monitoring speakers. The announcement was there, recorded and time-stamped. He listened to it 3 more times, analyzing the voice, the message, the strange specificity of 47 minutes. He saved the audio file and sent it to his supervisor's email with a message explaining what had happened. The response came back almost immediately. His supervisor was awake, working from his cabin. He wrote that he had listened to the audio file, but all he heard was a standard weather update from earlier in the evening. Joshua played the file again. On his system, it was still the mysterious announcement about final destination and 47 minutes. But his supervisor was hearing something completely different from the same file. Joshua spent the next 30 minutes searching through the system archives, looking for any historical record of similar incidents. What he found made his hands start to shake. Going back through years of saved logs from the Grand Horizon's previous transatlantic crossings, he discovered entries that had been flagged but never explained. Every crossing, approximately halfway through the voyage, between 1 and 2 in the morning, there was a notation in the technical logs. The notation always said the same thing. Unscheduled announcement recorded, source unknown, no broadcast confirmation. Previous sound engineers had noted the phenomenon. One entry from 2019 included a comment. Heard the final announcement again. 47 minutes to what? Another entry from 2021 simply said, protocol suggests ignoring phantom broadcasts, logging for record only. Joshua checked the timestamp on the announcement he had received. 1:47 in the morning. 47. He looked at the message again. Time remaining, 47 minutes. That would be 2:34 in the morning. He decided to stay in the technical room, to watch the clocks and monitors, to see if anything happened at 2:34. The minutes passed slowly. Joshua maintained his normal duties, but his attention kept returning to the clock display. At 2:20, he made fresh coffee, his nerves making his hands unsteady. At 2:30, he was sitting motionless in front of the monitors, watching multiple camera feeds and system displays simultaneously. At exactly 2:34 in the morning, the lights in the technical room flickered. It was brief, maybe half a second, but Joshua felt his heart rate spike. On his monitors, every system readout briefly showed red warning indicators before immediately returning to green. The ship's emergency backup systems logged an automatic activation lasting 3 seconds. And then everything was normal again. Joshua pulled up the ship's electrical system logs. There had been a power fluctuation at 2:34, a brief drop in primary power that had triggered the backup generators. The fluctuation had lasted 3 seconds before primary power was restored. On a ship this size, with redundant systems and multiple power sources, such an event should have been impossible without a significant mechanical failure somewhere in the engine rooms. Joshua reported the power fluctuation to engineering through the ship's internal communication system. The night engineer on duty said he would investigate. 2 hours later, when Joshua's shift ended at 6 in the morning, he received a message from the engineering team. They had found a fault in one of the primary electrical distribution panels. It was a minor issue, easily repaired, but if it had not been discovered and fixed, it could have cascaded into a much more serious problem. The MIST engineer estimated that if the fault had been allowed to continue, the ship would have experienced a major power failure within approximately 47 minutes of the initial fluctuation. A major power failure on a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean would mean loss of navigation systems, communication systems, propulsion. In emergency scenarios, the time estimate for coordinating rescue operations for a disabled vessel in that location was approximately 47 minutes before the situation would become critical. Joshua did not sleep that day. He spent hours researching the Grand Horizon's maintenance history, looking at previous transatlantic crossings. Each time the Phantom announcement had been reported by sound engineers, he found corresponding entries in engineering logs from the following day. Small electrical faults, minor mechanical issues, problems that had been discovered and repaired before they became catastrophic. All of them occurring at approximately the same point in the crossing. All of them potentially serious if left unaddressed. It was as if the ship itself was warning the sound engineers. As if some presence or consciousness aboard the vessel was sending messages through the PA system, alerting crew members to problems before they became disasters. But why the sound engineers? Why that specific announcement? And why could nobody else hear it the way it was intended? Joshua finished that crossing and returned to New York. He has since completed 3 more transatlantic voyages on the Grand Horizon. Each time, halfway through the crossing, between 1 and 2 in the morning, he hears the announcement. Final destination, 47 minutes. Each time, he logs it. Each time, he watches the clock until 2:34. And each time, something small but significant happens. A brief power fluctuation, an unusual vibration in the engine system, a momentary loss of satellite communication. And each time, the engineering team discovers a minor fault that could have become catastrophic if left unchecked. Joshua has stopped reporting the announcements as anomalies. He has stopped trying to explain them to supervisors or colleagues. He simply listens, logs the time, and waits for 2:34 in the morning to see what the ship is trying to tell him. Other sound engineers who work on the Grand Horizon have started comparing notes. They all hear it. They all receive the same message. They have all learned to pay attention to what happens at 2:34, to make sure the engineering team investigates thoroughly, to trust that 47 minutes might be all the warning anyone gets before something goes terribly wrong. Joshua still works on the Grand Horizon. He still does late-night maintenance between 11 and 3. And when the announcement comes, as it always does, he no longer feels afraid, he feels grateful. Because whatever is speaking through the PA system, whatever consciousness or presence has attached itself to this ship, it is not trying to harm anyone. It is trying to save them. And Joshua has learned that sometimes the most important part of his job is not managing the sound system. Sometimes it is simply listening.